Hey guys, and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be making an amazing strawberry and dark sweet cherry wine. It's going to be nice and bold. 3 gallons was what we're going to make, but you can make that however many gallons you want. Just kind of do the math for what I tell you to put in per gallon. I'll tell you everything about per gallon. The recipe will also be down in the description. But we're going to be using 24 pounds of fruit, which is more than most people use for just 3 gallons. So we're going to be using 12 pounds of dark cherries and 12 pounds of strawberries, kind of an equal blend there. And it's going to be a great wine. I'm going to show you everything that we're going to use today. So let's get started. All right, so this is most everything we're going to use. I'll show you the tools in just a second. But additives wise, we have an acid blend. We're going to be adding a half a teaspoon per gallon, so 1.5 teaspoons of acid blend. This is going to help with the brightness and the acidity of our overall wine. We're going to be adding wine tannin because there's little to no tannin in any of this. So this is going to give it some mouth feel. Let's try that again. Some mouth feel and bolder wine, so to speak. Absolutely necessary. Half a teaspoon per gallon, 1.5 teaspoons. We're going to be adding some pectic enzyme. Pectic enzyme is going to help us break that fruit down into juice, break through those cell walls. It's also going to help us clear the overall batch easier when it comes to time for refining. So this is great. Half a teaspoon per gallon, 1.5 teaspoons. And for our yeast today, I'm going to be going with you can use any yeast you want, really, but I'm going to be using Lavin 71B. The reason that is because this puts off some pretty fruity esters whenever it ferments sugar into alcohol, and well, that's what I want for this wine. This is only the alcohol by volume or alcohol environment that this is really tolerant with is about 14%. We're shooting for about 14% alcohol in this, so it may ferment all the way to 14, or we may get about 13.5, but we will see what happens. Have our Fermade K. Fermade K is going to be our yeast nutrient. No urea in this. If you don't know what that is, go look it up. But generally speaking, it's kind of banned commercially. So this has none of that in it. This has DAP in it though, which is a inorganic nitrogen booster for our yeast. This is going to really jumpstart our fermentation really strong. This is going to be a half a gram per gallon, 1.5 grams of Fermade K today. And then in 24 hours after fermentation starts, we will add 0.6 grams per gallon of our Fermade O at 24 hours and at 48 hours. And what that does is it keeps the nutrients kind of steady throughout the fermentation beginning process in the first 48 hours, or so to speak, and it gets rid of those like off flavors, the struggling yeast, the off smells and stuff like that. We have our 3 gallons of just regular old drinking water back here. Then we have our fruit, a scale. Right over here we have our sanitized hydrometer, our wine thief, to check the ABV as we kind of go down and add sugar in. We have our must bag. We have our sanitized items in here, but this is just Star San with a cup in it, so I can use that. And then we have our crusher. If you don't have a crusher like I do for our fruit, you can use a potato smasher or anything like that to crush up the fruit. Works just as well. I used to use that for a long time, but I use an at-home crusher for the fruit. And it goes right over the bucket, which you will need. And you're going to need about a 6.5 gallon fermentation bucket. 5 gallon will probably be a little bit tight. So this is a 6.5 gallon bucket. That gives you some headspace for fermentation, some oxygen to do the initial fermentation process. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let's go ahead and put in our water. You can do this any number of ways. You could crush your fruit first and put the fruit into a must bag and then add water behind it, or add sugar first, or you can do this any number of ways. This is how I'm going to do it for this batch, and see if maybe this is a little bit more streamlined, so to speak. So we want 3 gallons of water. Keep in mind that we're going to get juice from our fruit. So when that juice from the fruit enters into this must, it's going to put us over 3 gallons. And that's what we want. We want to be over 3 gallons so that as we rack and we move our wine around and clear it, we have a little bit extra, and I'll show you that as we work through this process, so that we are topping off with our own wine from its own batch and not a different bottle of wine for the headspace, if at all possible. Sometimes it works out right. Sometimes you get a little bit more gross lees than you expected. So it just kind of depends on exactly how much lees are there and how much headspace you'll end up with and how much extra you'll need, but we'll see when we get there. All right, so here's we have a 50 pound bag of sugar here. We make a lot of wine. So what we did is I added 7 pounds of sugar to those 3 gallons of water, and that put me right at, let's see if you can see that, focus in, right at about 12%. The 12 is right at the surface tension, so you can barely see it, maybe 11.9, 12%. But we want to get to 14.5%. So we still have to crush our fruit to put that in, and that's going to give us some sugars, natural sugars, just from that fruit and the juice as we crush it. And that should raise us about 2 to 4%, give or take, somewhere in that range, which may put us over our 14% mark. And if it does, what I'll do is I'll just switch out our Lavin 71B with Lavin K11116, which has an 18% alcohol, so we don't have to worry about any kind of this struggling or stalling there. But let's just see where we get with our natural sugars from here. All right, so let's go ahead and put in our additives real quick. I was almost going to crush the fruit, so we're holding the must bag over here to the side. This is going to be our 3 Candom tablets. Just crush it between 2 spoons, easiest way to do that. If you've seen any of my other videos, that's how I always do it. We have 1 extra. All right. And this is going to help sanitize, so to speak, get rid of any of that nasty bacteria or anything like that with the fruit. Then we're going to add in our 1.5 teaspoons of pectic enzyme. 1, 2, 3. Our 1.5 teaspoons of our mixed acid blend. 1, 2, 3, and our wine tannin, 1.5 teaspoons of that as well, 1/2 teaspoon per gallon for our 3 gallons. All right, that's good enough. And you can see that's why I love using the drill. That's why I love that the fruit's not in there yet, because all of this would have to be kind of incorporated working around the must bag. I used to crush this first, but it's a lot easier this way just to get it all mixed in, and then let's do the fruit. Let's go ahead and crush up the fruit. After we added our fruit, it's nice and crushed. Also notice this is tied up really tight. It also has that silicone zip tie on it. You can actually sanitize these and keep them forever pretty much. This is awesome. Make sure this is closed. This is gonna help us clear later because all that fruit's gonna stay within the must bag. With that being said, we added a total of 3 gallons of water, 10 pounds of sugar, and that put us right at, if you can see that, 14% on the dot, which is going to be the alcohol tolerance of the 71B. So we should be fine. 71B usually will go even a little bit further to 14%, but right at 14%, we should get all the way down to a dry fermentation. And one thing I forgot to mention, I've got 1.5 grams here of the Fermade K that I'm going to go ahead and add in. I forgot to add that in earlier, but I'll go ahead and incorporate that now, which is our yeast nutrient. I just forgot to add it earlier. All right, guys, there you have it. Here's our strawberry and dark cherry wine sitting for 24 hours. We'll add in our 71B yeast. After that, those potassium metabisulfite or Candom tablets do their thing and kind of clean up the wine and get it ready for a nice environment for our yeast. We'll add that in tomorrow. We will also add in our Fermade O at 24 hours after fermentation starts, and then another 24 hours after that, and keep that nice environment for our yeast. Also keep in mind, we don't generally use this much fruit, but there's 24 pounds for 3 gallons, so which is why it seems like it's so full. But if I were to remove that must bag, the actual liquid in there is going to be just about 3.5 gallons with the juice from the fruit as well. So the whole point of that is to make sure you have more than 3 gallons of wine, even though you're making a quote-unquote 3-gallon batch, so that you can rack and have a little bit of extra wine to fill in your headspace when we start refining this out. So come back 24 hours. All right, so it is time to pitch our yeast. So we're gonna go ahead and make a yeast starter. You don't have to make a yeast starter. You could pour that packet of 71B just right into the must or the batch and get it started. But since there's 24 pounds of fruit in that, there's gonna be a lot, there's a lot of fruit and a lot of things going on in there. So I just wanna give the yeast the best possible chance to just get kick-started into fermentation and get going. So I'm gonna make a yeast starter. I'll show you how to do that, it's pretty easy. This is 1/2 cup of water, warmed to about 105, 110 degrees right now. We're not gonna put our yeast in yet, but what I am gonna do is put in 1 tablespoon of just white sugar, just regular old table sugar, cane sugar. Get that dissolved. And then I'm gonna add in just a pinch of Fermade K, so it has a little bit of nutrient. All right, our sugar is dissolved. The 0.5 is the Fermade K. I usually only put 0.3 or 0.2 to 0.3 or just a pinch, but whenever I was putting the fermented K into it, it just poured a little bit much, and I'm not going to take it out. It's going to be fine. So this is going to be 0.5 fermented K, 1 tablespoon of that sugar. It's going to all dissolve up. Once this hits the temperature, and I'll show you what that is right now. So we're at 99 degrees. I'm still gonna let that go down to about 90 to 95 degrees before we add our yeast. Let everything kind of set up, let the temperature come down, and then we'll add our yeast, sprinkle it on top, and get this going. All right, so we're at 95 degrees on our warm water here. And looking at 71B, the recommendation here is 95 to 98 degrees for their yeast starter. So we're gonna go ahead, or to energize or get the yeast going, hydrate if you will. We're gonna go ahead and put the yeast in. And again, we're just going to sprinkle that on top. Being gentle not to make a mess here. Get it all out of the packet. We're definitely going to need all this yeast for that 24 pounds of fruit. Alrighty, there we go. Yeast inside. We're going to let that set up for 15 minutes, and then we're going to add our 2 tablespoons of our straight from our must. Wait another 15 minutes. Then we're going to add about 4 tablespoons of our must. Let it set up for 30 minutes, and then we'll pitch it. All right, so it's been 15 minutes. This is why I love yeast starters making one. You can see how healthy that yeast is just already without any kind of the must yet, just some sugar. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add 2 tablespoons of our must. One, 2. So that's just straight from the must. We're going to wait 15 minutes. Then we're going to add 4 tablespoons. All right, so it's been 15 minutes. That is a beautiful sight there. Look at that yeast just rising up. That tells you that your yeast is activated. It's in a healthy environment. It's doing what it's supposed to do, converting those sugars into alcohol. So now we're going to add in 4 more tablespoons of our must and let that go for 30 minutes this time. That'll be the last time we'll add it into our overall batch. All right, there we go. 4 of those. A little swirl, not a shake, just a swirl. And we'll let that sit for the next 30 minutes. All right, so it has been 30 minutes. So that looks perfect with that foam on top. If you put your ear to that, you can also hear it sizzling or like Rice Krispies. You know that that is an activated yeast there. Nice and comfortable. And we'll just swirl that a little bit. Just like that. We're not going to shake it up. Just going to kind of swirl it. And let's go ahead and put that into our must. All right, so here's our batch of strawberry and cherry wine here. This is our yeast starter. We're just going to go ahead and pour it in there. All right, get that 71B and start making some alcohol. Then we're just going to mix it up a little bit. Remember, from here on out, starting tomorrow, we will be pushing this fruit, or this cap, if you will, the actual term for this, when it floats to the top from the CO2 that's fermenting. We're going to be pushing that down twice a day for the first 5 days. And that's going to keep this bag nice and wet and nothing drying out on top of it as it starts to really build some foam from the fermentation. 2 times a day, next 5 days. All right, so this is our first stir of our strawberry cherry wine after we've added our yeast. And we're not even really 24 hours yet, and you can see the sides of the wall there, the yeast is bubbling, starting to build up, which is great. We're probably only about 12 hours since I've added that yeast starter, so it looks great. When you're pushing this cap down, remember, twice a day. This is day 1, so we'll do this for the next 4 days after this. Use the must bag or your stirring device of whatever you're using, and keep all this stuff off of the walls and incorporate it into the wine. You don't want this stuff, it's going to take at least a week for this to ferment, and you don't want, or longer, and you don't want this stuff to dry on the sides of the fermentation vessel that you're using, bucket, what have you. Keep it all nice and cleaned up like that. Everything nice and wet and incorporated into the batch itself. All right, perfect. We will come back one more time this afternoon and stir it again. And then we're going to do that for the next 4 days. All right, so we are fermenting away, and it has been 24 hours since our primary fermentation has started. I just took some of the wine out and added our Fermade O for our 3 gallons, for our 3-gallon batch here. So it's going to be 0.6 per gallon. So I think we're at 1.8 grams total. We're just going to go ahead and pour that in, and then we will use our stir here to make sure we get it all nice and incorporated. And that will be our first, or I guess our second if you consider the Fermade K at primary must creation yeast nutrient. We'll do one more of these at 48 hours, so tomorrow, and then that will be the end of our yeast nutrient additions. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and add our last yeast nutrient here. It's been 48 hours since we started this fermentation. So we got 1.8 grams, 0.6 per gallon of our Fermade O. Just gonna pour it right on top there. All that is just mixed in with the must itself. You can see our fermentation is going according to plan. So no problems there. Nice healthy yeast. And this is, you'll see this really aggressive fermentation like this. This is what I've come to expect whenever I use this type of yeast nutrient schedule, with Fermade K being at the front end to get it started, and then 2 doses of Fermade O really pushes the fermentation to the max. All right, so our strawberry cherry wine it's been 1 week, and we are at 0.0996 on our hydrometer, which means that we are dry enough to put into our secondary, and all those fermentable sugars I've at least fermented to the point to move to secondary. So we're gonna rack it today. Gonna go ahead and point out some things here. We're gonna be adding bentonite today in our secondary. I have various sizes of vessels here, and that's because we don't know exactly how much is gonna come out of there after I press it. So remember, we made 3 gallons, quote unquote, but we always make a little bit more than 3 gallons. So more than 3 gallons is gonna come out of this. I just don't know exactly how much. And that's so that we can maintain our headspace in our primary vessel, which is gonna be this one, as we rack it over time and we clear out that wine. So you're gonna need some airlocks, your bungs. This is what we're going to use to stir up and agitate that bentonite once we add that in. I'll hook that up to a drill. This is made for a drill, so it makes it really easy to do. So this is going to be an optional accessory, if you will. We're going to press the strawberries and cherries into a bowl, and then we're going to reincorporate that right back into the wine. It makes it for a bolder fruit wine. I do this every time. It's the same traditional way you would do with a red grape varietal wine like Tempranillo, Zinfandel, etc. So it works really well with fruit wines, so we're going to do that. But this is an optional step. You can just remove the fruit from here, toss the fruit, and rack the wine. You don't need to do this. I just wanted to point that out. Some other tools of the trade here. Our auto siphon, we're going to be racking that. I'm not going to go too much into this. If you'd like to figure out how to use this or what that is, look at some of my other videos. This is the bowl we're going to be using. Everything is sanitized. We have our sanitizer ready to go, so let's get started. All right, so now for the little bit of the messy part is we're going to move over our bag of fruit over to the press. I'll just show you, even if you're not going to do this, you can just fast forward past this part, but this is a really interesting tool to have. You should have it if you're going to be making, you know, a lot of wine, a lot of meads where you want to press your fruit, or any kind of grape varietal for that matter. Get our fruit out of here. We're just going to move it right over to our press. And if you're interested in this, it's in the links in the description below. All right, we're just going to plop it right over there. Now we'll press it. All right, so now what I'm going to do is just reincorporate that right back into the wine. You can see how much this is. This is why we do this. And that's some nice, bold wine juice right out of the fruit itself, so it's great. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and rack this. It looks like we got just over 5 gallons here when combined. Remember, a lot of this at the bottom is gonna be gross lees, probably like 5 or under 5 gallons that we got from our fruit and our 3 gallons of water and adding in our sugar and everything, the whole volume, a little over 5 gallons. But we're gonna rack that now into our secondaries down here. This is a 3 gallon, that's a 1 gallon. I'll probably use one more 1 gallon if it is a true 5, but let's see what we get. We'll go ahead and rack that now. All right, so we got about 4.5 gallons total. Like I said, there's a lot of lees in this. We had a lot of fruit, so that's expected to have a lot of gross leaves. That's what's on the bottom. You can see what we lost there. So you can see on the remaining, let's see if we can see with the light. I'll show you. So I'll kind of move it around. So yeah, you can see it moving right there. So we had about 1 gallon of that is just leaves and stuff that we're not going to be racking into our wine to start that secondary. So we got about 4.5 gallons. All right, before we add our bentonite, I wanted to point out something. So we ended up with 4.5 gallons. We will not end up with 4.5 gallons at the end of this by the time we get to bottle. That's why we make a little bit extra, so that we can top off our primaries with our secondaries, not any other wine, or our primary carboys with our other wine. You can see the gross leaves already starting down there to form. Right there. Well, I guess you can consider them fine leaves at this point, but gross leaves in this case, even though it's a secondary rack, you can see that fruit just had a lot of leaves. So we're going to lose that headspace next time we rack it, whenever we do our super clear and we get into that refining process after our bentonite. I just wanted to point that out. So we're already going to lose wine there. All right, so we have our bentonite. We're going to be using 2 teaspoons of bentonite for a half cup of water. This cup of water is very hot. Just got it out of the microwave, about 30-40 seconds or so, almost boiling. We're going to add in our 2 teaspoons each, and we're going to put 1 full into the 3 gallon, and we'll split 1 between the 2 smaller vessels here. Little tip of when you're adding this in, sprinkle it, don't dump, because it'll clump up very quickly. This is a half teaspoon measuring spoon, so we're going to use 4 of these to make 2 teaspoons. And the reason it's in a mason jar is because bentonite is not easy to mix, so we're going to be using the lid to the mason jar to shake it up pretty vigorously. So you can see that's kind of the consistency we're looking for. Trying to get rid of most of the clumps. You won't get rid of every single clump, but 90% of it. Nice kind of almost like watery clay type consistency is what we're looking for. We'll let that cool down just a little bit, and then we'll get that into our wine. All right, so we're going to go ahead and split 1 of these now between our 2 smaller vessels here. And this amount of bentonite will do up to about 5 to 6 gallons, something to keep in mind, but it doesn't hurt anything if you just put it into a smaller vessel. I'm going to use our funnel that's been sanitized. All right. Go ahead and put the rest of this into our 1 gallon. Alrighty. Now we're gonna shake them up and agitate them pretty heavily. What we're doing is charging up that bentonite and getting it mixed in really well with the wine so it can start doing its process of clearing up the wine here. Don't worry about mixing in all those leaves again, they're all gonna fall back out. All right, this one is gonna go fully into our 3 gallon here. So we left a little bit of headspace there, but also because we have to mix it. I'm going to use a drill for that. If you don't have a drill, that's perfectly fine. Just any kind of mixing wand will work, but a drill works perfect in this case. You can see it's already starting to foam up pretty quickly, so just pay attention to that as you're mixing it. Get that nice incorporated in there, mix up that, get all those leaves off the bottom and mixed up. All right, all nice with the bentonite added, starting that clearing process. Here they will sit. At least for the next 7 to 14 days, that bentonite will work and start to clear this up. We'll do our second round of clearing with super clear, and you'll see that big change that we're going to get with that. But this is going to be the bentonite stage. See those leaves starting to form up again, even though we mix it up pretty heavily? That'll happen pretty quick. All that stuff will fall out. All right, so it is day 14 of our overall strawberry and cherry wine here, but it is day 7 that it has sat here with bentonite, and you can see the bentonite has done a pretty good job. That is pretty clear. So you can see the half gallon here is extremely clear. The 1 gallon is pretty clear, but the 3 gallon is working on it. We'll just say that. So although it's not perfectly clear, it is good enough to go ahead and get it over to the next stage, which is going to be our super clear refining stage. I'm going to do 2 stages of clearing in this particular wine, and that's going to get it to bottle in less than 30 days. So you'll see from the bentonite, we have a fair amount of gross leaves down here. So we're going to go ahead and get it off of that. Each container there, each vessel has some gross leaves. I imagine this is going to be about a 10 to 15% loss overall. So we're probably going to get we will for sure get a full 3 gallon, but we'll see. I got various sizes here. We may get another gallon out of that in a small mason jar, but I doubt obviously that we're going to be able to fill up another half gallon here. So this smaller jar is going to actually be for our super clear, and I'll show you how we're going to add that in. And all you're going to need today is just a racking cane your sanitizer and some kind of a stirring wand, and that's going to be to incorporate the super clear into the overall vessel here. The smaller ones will shake, but we'll use that stirring wand to stir this up. So let's go ahead and get this racked into a new vessel. All right, I didn't want to bore you the racking time. So you can see we got 4 gallons as expected. We lost about a half a gallon. Let me show you here. All right, so coming up to what we have left, you can see that little bit in there. And I didn't get the rest of that. And the reason is because it's smaller to get an auto siphon going or it's harder to get a auto siphon going in a smaller vessel like this. And a lot of the agitation will kick up a lot of these lees. And I'd rather just leave it there. So I saw it start to really get into these last little bit of wine there. So I just went ahead and left that. We've got a solid 4 gallons down there, which is perfect. And this is what's left. You can see that stuff in there. That's what we're trying to avoid, again, and keep out of our wine. And then in our big 3 gallon one here, you can see all that stuff. So we just kind of skimmed off the top and make sure that we left all of that stuff behind. The other thing that this is really going to help with is as we continue to refine this with our super clear, one thing I wanted to point out is, and you can see the light coming through, it looks really pretty. The gross lees that we got rid of will help improve the overall flavor and the overall nose on the wine. Those are all those dead yeast cells and then just things floating around in there and microparticulates and everything that kind of fell out of suspension into the bottom. This will start to really improve in terms of its nose and its overall flavor now that it's off of these two. So let's go ahead and get the first round of super clear in here. I think it's the Ketosol is the first round, and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so all we're gonna do here is I have a sanitized funnel there. Here's our Ketosol. This is the first part of the super clear. And what we're gonna do is this is going to be added in to both. We're going to agitate. For here, I'm gonna put a lid on and I'm gonna shake this one. For the bigger one over here, the big boy, I'm gonna use my drill stirring one, which is extremely helpful. You could pour this into a glass and you could get the overall grams of what the weight, even though it's liquid, of this particular liquid or pack and divide that, giving 2/3 to the big boy here and maybe 1/3 over here. I just kind of eyeball it. I know that about half of this liquid is going to be about right here. So I'm going to give in about 2/3 of this overall pack to the larger 3 gallon. This is good for about 5 to 6 gallons. And then I'll give this last little third here to the 1 gallon here. And again, just eyeballing it. It works for me. If you want to be very technical about it, you could definitely weigh it out. So let's go ahead and get that added in. While we're waiting, I did want to point out, this is one of the best parts of brewing your own wine or being a vintner, so to speak, or making your own mead, is you get to taste it at every stage. So let's go ahead and give this a taste, see what the nose is. So right now, the nose is very alcohol forward. It smells a little bit sharp. I'm getting a little bit of that fruit, but not a whole lot is coming through. It doesn't smell as strawberry as I would like it to, but let's see if that develops a little bit with some sugar and over time. All right, so it is about day 7 with our strawberry cherry wine here sitting in super clear. And you can see it's done an amazing job here. That is just beautiful in this smaller vessel. But one thing I did want to say with super clear is sometimes you'll get these little particulates that will kind of hang out at the top of the wine. And what we don't want is that. So with super clear, as the days go on, once you get into about day 3, 4, what I would suggest is just take the top of the vessel, give it a little swirl, just like that. Nothing much, just a little swirl. And you might have to do that for the next couple of days, just once a day or so, maybe twice a day. And eventually these little particulates are gonna fall down to the bottom and they're not gonna rise back up. You can see in the bigger one here, we've got a few more than in the smaller one that are kind of sitting up here. Again, just a little bit of a swirl there. And what it does is it kicks them out along the side of the vessel. And eventually these are going to make their way, see these little bigger chunks here. Eventually these are gonna make their way back down into the lees down here. So if you see this, where they're kind of coagulating is the wrong word, but if they're kind of combining up here at the top or forming up here at the top, a little shake like that will generally get them to fall. We're looking for the clarity up here. There might be just a tad of those left when we go to either filter or bottle or rack to bottle rather. But just kind of keep that in mind and give it a little shake just like that. You can also see something that's a little bit more, and this is kind of more of the advanced stuff, to just keep an eye open for, to watch your wines, right, or your meads. See how there's no bubbles here, even with me giving it a little bit of a stir there, and you can see that there's less of those little particulates that are around the top. In the bigger one here, you can see there's a little bit of bubbles that are up at the top. Even though there weren't very many whenever we racked it, there are some bubbles up here at the top, which means that it's still kind of releasing off some of that gas and some of that CO2, which is carrying up those particulates. You can actually see some of them rising. So the gases are coming through the wine and they're actually coming up to the top up here. And what we want is not that. We want a still wine, as still as possible by the time we get to the bottling phase. So we're gonna give this some more time to sit and clear up and let some of this stuff go down. It's gonna be day 7 now, so if we give it another week or less, we'll keep checking on it, but I'll come back and I'll show you what it looks like when it's completely done and ready for the bottle. All right, so today we are going to get ready to bottle this tomorrow, 24 hours from now. So we are 24 hours prior to our anticipated bottling. And you can see we have our Candom tablets here that we're going to be adding 24 hours before, 1 tablet per gallon. And we have our potassium sorbate that we'll be adding here at a ½ teaspoon per gallon. That's going to stabilize our wine when we back sweeten it. So no more further fermentation takes place inside of our bottles and makes it unsightly. That also makes some lees in there that doesn't look very nice. This is ready to go. If you can see here, the clarity there from the super clear is great all the way down to the bottom. That's why I always use a flashlight. You'll see me use this in other videos and to ensure that clarity. So this is perfect for bottling. This is what you're going to be doing. You and I are going to be doing something a little bit different at this point. If you watch my videos, you'll know this. I will be sterile filtering my wine. And that's because that's just what I choose to do. 99% of you are not going to be doing this. Go watch my video on this. This is great. I do it because I give it out friends, family, and when we have friends over to drink and whatnot. And especially for our small little home wine, we want to be professional. So we sterile filter. You do not need to do that. 99.99% of people will not do that. At this point, all you're going to do while I'm filtering, you're going to be racking. So you will rack your wine into a new vessel, get it off of the fine lees. These are now called fine lees, the little bit of lees that are down here. Don't get any of that into your mix. We don't want any of that whatsoever. But you're going to rack this into a new vessel, nice clean vessels, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to add in our additives and get this ready for bottling 24 hours from now. So you go ahead and rack. I'm going to filter. We'll come back. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with this. You can see there's our nice filtered cacao. Nice and polished that is. It's great. You're done with your racking, so let's go ahead and add in our additives. There's our 3 gallon and our ½ gallon. All I've done here is taken some of our wine out with the wine thief. We're going to start with our big boy here, the 3 gallon. And we're going to add in 3 Candom tablets, 1 tablet per gallon. One thing to pay attention to, don't freak out if you haven't done this before, it will change the color of the little bit of wine that's in this mason jar. And that's because the sulfites are so concentrated in here that they'll actually change the color of the wine. But once you incorporate it into your overall wine, that will go away. So then we'll put in our 3 ½ teaspoons, 1 teaspoon per gallon of our potassium sorbate. Again, remember, this is going to stop any further fermentation because we're going to be back sweetening tomorrow whenever we go to bottle this. Back sweetening fruit wine, you can have it dry, that's fine, but back sweetening any kind of fruit wine, it's kind of important because it really makes the fruit pop. It really brings out, even if you just back sweeten it a little bit, we'll make some a little bit sweeter, some a little bit drier, but some kind of sugar at least is kind of required to get that fruit to pop. It's not that the fruit's not there already, but the sweetness really does help with the overall. I'm not gonna crazy shake this, I'm just gonna kind of incorporate it to the best that I can here. But I don't want to aggressively shake it because what'll happen is it'll get unnecessarily bubbly and really foamy. And what we're trying to do here is just incorporate. It's going to incorporate anyways once we put into that. And I'm going to stir it up with my stirring wand, you can see here, and my drill nice and slow. That'll also help to relieve any gas that's in the wine still, which at this point shouldn't be very much. The degassing has pretty much taken place over all the different rackings and filterings and what have you. So we'll go ahead and pour this in, get our funnel. All right, so it is my favorite day, which is bottling day. We're gonna go ahead and get this racked over to a bucket that we have down there that's nice and sanitized and ready to go. We'll be mixing in our sugar, our back sweetening, into that bucket down there. We have our bottle tree here. If you've seen my videos, this is great. This really is awesome for a lot of, we have about 18 bottles here because we have 50, you always get 15 give or take, out of a 3-gallon. This is a half-gallon, so which would mean 18, give or take 17, 18 total here. And we want to have some smaller ones for some tastings and for giving out to friends that maybe don't want a full bottle. So in addition, we have our corks here. These corks are straight from Portugal, right out of the, if you've seen my videos for those two, they're in the description below. These are great. These will be sitting in some sanitizers, so they're nice and sanitized and wet whenever we put them in, with our floor corker, which is right here. And other tools included will be our wine thief. We'll using to be take some wine out to test it and taste it, our racking cane, our auto siphon, our mixing wand. All right, so we have racked it. We have about 3.5 gallons in here. We're going to use our scale. I'll show you guys today in grams how much sugar I'm going to be adding to our 3.5 gallons. Remember, if you don't have 3.5 gallons, the sugar added will be slightly different in terms of taste, but this is all about taste and your personal preference at this point. I do have wine in here that I used from my fancy dancy turkey baster. And this is what I will be dissolving the sugar in before adding it to the overall. And that's just to kind of shake up a little bit of wine and get the sugar dissolved and not to agitate the whole thing, to reduce the oxidization as much as possible here. And then just to show you, we have our tasting glasses. You can already see that nice orange hue from the strawberries that you normally get with the red in there from the cherries. So it looks great, looks nice and polished. This will be our kind of our standard against the sweet that we're gonna be testing, so that we know exactly what the original tastes like and then where we're at currently. All right, we have reached where we like it, and we are at a total of 967 grams of back sweetening sugar for the 3.5 gallon batch here. And it is completely changed from this is one of the ideas that my wife had a few batches ago, or a few vintages ago, was to make sure we have an original to smell, to taste, against one that we're changing with our back sweetening. And the difference in smell between the two of these is ridiculous. This one smells much more fruit forward. The strawberry really pops out of it, and the flavor in it overall is really good. The sugar really pops out with the body. It makes it a heavier wine on the tongue rather than a lighter, watery wine that's just dry. And it also reduces some of that alcohol forwardness when you add in that sugar. So this is a very high alcohol content in terms of wine, being that 14.69%, and it can have a tendency to be a little hot, so to speak. But it really did balance it out and come out great. So very, very impressed with the final product here. So let's go and get it bottled up. All right, there you have it, our strawberry cherry wine. And it is our small home winery, Vita Brevis. Takes two to tango. Still working on the name and the label, but you get the point. Kind of the fun part of making your own stuff here. So I hope you enjoyed the video. And if this was helpful for you, or you learned anything, please hit that like and that subscribe button. Or if you enjoyed the content, it really does help a small channel out. Until the next time, cheers.